welcome. I'm just going to do a quick intro. We have Mark Kashman from the SharePoint product team. He'll introduce himself. Hopefully everyone is enjoying the event, and I'll turn it over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. And thank you to everybody. This is just joining in the workshops midday, Minnesota midday. Thank you for joining. If you were here throughout the morning and all the great workshops, kicking it off and then diversifying to whatever piqued your interest, I hope that this will give you some tools that you can go and try today. Most everything that I'm going to share, except for a few things at the end, just to talk a little roadmap, is everything that you can do in production. And it's very oriented around what it is you do during your day-to-day with your colleagues in teams. And I hope you'll see a lot of the work that we've been doing is making it so that you can get the value of lists in teams, from creation to collaboration to even reference if you need to go look and search through a list from a while ago. You can do that all within teams. It used to be a little bit more of a consumption perspective. Now it's a create experience. But I was very pleased to get the invite from Michelle and team to be here today. It's kind of been one of those things on the horizon that I've looked forward to. Certainly talking about lists anytime is a joy for me. But I really do hope you get the value of use and adoption if you have Microsoft 365, Office 365, or if you're one of those customers and people that have just SharePoint Online standalone. This is still relevant, maybe not the Teams part, but the list part. But you'll see really the breadth of what you can do with lists in Teams, and hopefully that value of what it adds to that collaborative hub that is Teams. So if you haven't already made noise, make noise now about this session and the rest of the sessions during the day. And in the chat, I'll be pausing a couple times if there are questions. Certainly ask those. I will certainly take them offline if I don't get to them. Stay on and answer some questions in the chat. If anything, again, piques your interest. But to plug forward, just real quickly, who is this guy with this hat talking to you? Not only is it him there on the screen and that fun emoji with the hat, but I'm Mark. I am on the Microsoft 365 marketing team. I've worked on SharePoint for quite some time with the product group, outreach to customers, working with partners, doing fun things at events with demos and blogs and all that good stuff. But I now have diversified a little bit to add to what has been the evolution of SharePoint lists to Microsoft lists. And I work with my peers in the Teams org, in the Viva org, and I work with folks that work on SharePoint syntax. So that's kind of my sphere of where I work and live. I also co-produce and co-host a podcast with Chris McNulty called The Interzone. And we've covered lists on a couple of different episodes, one of them being that value of lists in Teams. And I live in the Pacific Northwest, now wearing this hat, not just for today, but because it's starting to get cold outside. And so when I go out and do different activities like kayaking, hiking, soccer, I usually look like you see me today. So I'm no different in person, in virtual space. And if you like to do reading, I have a blog that I've been doing mostly around what I work on. It's the Cashbox at the substack.com. And if you couldn't tell, I really like emojis. I even like being an emoji. And in this new space, maybe I'll like being an avatar once I get that feature rolled out. So that's who I am, and here's what we are to talk about. We are here to articulate the value. If you didn't know, there's a lists app in Teams, and it's balanced with what you do in Teams. Chat with your peers, call and meet, and of course do a lot of things. It's a very broad product. And we're really excited to bring lists into the fold as a first party, first experience, a high-end experience as far as what you can do in Teams with lists. The whole concept is for you to be able to track what matters most. A lot of what I do is track features for the product teams, or track events that we're going to be participating in, or just track who did I talk with last and what did we talk about. And so hopefully you'll see some of the scenarios. They're baked into the product with templates, and of course, they come through and they're right there for you to use in a channel. That's the setup. Where this all lives, if it isn't clear, I think a lot of the day is spent focused on the Microsoft 365 experience, what we do in the Microsoft cloud to make sure that you are connected both with people that you work with, the content that you work on, and that this might be in a distributed fashion, not just the workforce itself with different roles and regions and locations. But today I'm presenting from my home. I may, next week I have a presentation where I'll actually be on campus because I'm meeting with a customer, and then I have a webinar. And it really is flexible in the sense of where are you working? Who are you working with? What are you working on? And what do you need right now? Or if you're planning, what do you need in the future to be able to plan that right hybrid experience? Or based on where you're at, do I have the right device? Do I have the right connectivity? Our intent is that we're pretty agnostic to the where you are, who you work with, and what you work on, to give you the tools to center in and keep your focus, but at the same time be flexible enough so that you can work with different people in different regions in different ways, especially, is I think the most important thing. This all, of course, centers around a lot of applications, some that you might know and use, some that you might know and maybe haven't tried out yet, some you might not even have access to just yet. Like I don't have access to the designer yet, but I'm definitely on that wait list because I'm excited to kind of create my own social media aspects in a little bit of a different way outside of PowerPoint or the very limited capabilities I have in Photoshop. But this whole breadth of portfolio of applications and services, our intent is to make them not only work for their singular or multifunction in a really great way, but to also bring it so that as you start to work on things with other people, it's a cohesive experience. It's not hard to do in terms of sharing or just having that equitable experience of everybody knowing enough to be able to contribute without feeling that angst of having the technology be a little bit of a too steep of a slope to curve on. But we're bringing a lot to the table within Microsoft 365. We know you don't use everything, but we also know that when you're using more than one thing, we want that to be a cohesive experience and not multi-clicks away and not to have to change context too often. So I'm in Microsoft 365 the entire time I demo, and we'll get there pretty quickly. But I also just wanted to raise awareness that the breadth of what we offer is a hopefully a good investment for you to be able to accomplish all the different tasks and different tracking needs, and of course the actual collaboration when working with others on all of that. So there is, of course, a lot more applications on here. I honestly kept lists off of this by nature of this being kind of the top level entry point. But let's not forget a lot of the reasons why we ship and build our products and combine them into these broader packages. Microsoft 365 is the largest packaged offering of apps and services that we have and have had to date. There's been things like the eCal in the past, or we put a lot of components into the SharePoint server in the past so that it could do a lot of things for you, not just be where you store documents, not just to be the location where you have a site or a portal, but also to be that environment where you're doing real work and collaboration. And so that packaging sometimes is where you will see the cost savings. I also think it's a little bit of savings around time, your time and the time of other people. When you're asking them to contribute to something that you're working on, when you're asking them to use the technology because you're sharing your environment with them, like a guest in Teams, or just somebody who's your peer that you invite into a channel. That is to give you all the tools that you need. So when you look at the two tools that we're talking about today, this shouldn't be a surprise. I know there's probably been already sessions on Microsoft Teams, so this is just a one slider. But as you know, it does a lot. It certainly is the center of gravity for where you have your meetings if you're invested in Microsoft 365, your chats, your collaboration around a lot of common elements like with your documents and asking questions and finding the right people and working with your team day to day. As you move from that, meetings like we're having now to chat to call, being able to fully replace, your entire calling system. I've had a soft phone for what feels like now more than a decade. I don't miss the desk phone. I have all the access that I need, web, mobile, and on the desktop. And it really enables me to then really move into that collaborative space. And when you start to work beyond the conversation, you start to work on content. And that's where we'll spend the majority of our time today talking about the value of content, which is that list information, that list item, in context with then talking with somebody else and asking them to contribute, or what do they think, or can you update this when the timing is right? And hopefully when you start to look into Teams, our hope is that you automate as much as possible. I think I've heard a couple of our Microsoft MVPs talk about the value of, if I do it once, great. If I do it twice, I should start thinking about on the third time to automate it, to have some automation so that it keeps us away from having to do everything manually. Right alongside now Teams is Microsoft Lists. And I'll be pretty short here because you're going to see a ton of it today. But our goal has been to make them more easy to use, easier to use, for them to be smarter. So to do some work for you, if not, do some of that automation that I talked about, and for it to be flexible so that you visualize your information or other people visualize your information in a way that's easiest for them to consume. And that can be with coloring, the color coding, some of the color conditional formatting, and of course, some of the views that we have. But the intent is for you to be able to track what matters most. And if you ask yourself, what does matter most to me? What do I do in my job that this might be applicable to? I hope you ask that throughout the session. You're going to see some of my scenarios. You're going to see some of the uses of the templates, which have scenarios baked into them, which is why they exist. And of course, for you to be able to think, what if I did this or that? I could do that in lists. It always is good to come at Microsoft Lists with an idea of what do you want to track, and then build off of that. It's a flexible environment for you to add what you need, to remove what maybe isn't necessary, and then to repeat after that. If you have tracking mechanisms that are common, like for me, I track events throughout the whole year, and I essentially use the same events template. I've tweaked it a little bit, and now I use my little tweaked events list for each of my events going forward. And there's a really easy way to do that I will show you. If you didn't know, SharePoint lists, lowercase l, is now evolved into Microsoft Lists, and we've moved beyond SharePoint. So there, of course, is still the capability to create a list in SharePoint, to experience the list in SharePoint, but we now have the capability, of course, to do this same action in Teams, do the same action on your iOS or Android device without many limitations. And of course, the ability to take things offline on your desktop with the progressive web app capabilities. So a lot of those entry points, even to the expectations of Microsoft Search, the new Microsoft 365 app, or the Office.com experience, has that notion of being able to see your list, to be able to create a list from Office.com. Real powerful, really, though, centralizes in this new offering that's up-leveled what was SharePoint List is now Microsoft Lists. So here we go into, well, how do these things combine? Lots of great colors in the icons. The list icon on the left is one of my favorite new icons. I think the new designer one is pretty cool too. And I really like the loop icon. And of course, I'm pretty accustomed in really enjoying the Teams icon. And I think they're representative of what they do. On the left, I'm tracking information, sometimes in rows and columns, and in Teams, I'm working with other people. So what happens when you combine those together? When you track information with other people, that's really the goal that I hope you leave with. Is it's really easy to do. It's very powerful to be able to direct somebody right to a list item. Maybe there's 50 or 60 sessions for an event that I'm planning, and I can reach out to somebody and say, hey, I need your new title for this event. Please update it here. And it's not a big spreadsheet that I send them. It's not something they have to scroll through and find. It's a link. When they hit it, they go right to where the action is. So I thought we would dive into it and actually see it all in action. And I'll just kind of jump over to my Teams environment, and hope that this is coming through. And Michelle, if at all you get a sense from you or other people that the text is a little too small or it's a little hard to see what I'm doing, just let me know. I try to bump up my resolution because I'll go full screen, but just let me know if anything's really hard to see. So what you're looking at here, kind of jumping right into it, is a list in a Teams channel. The Teams channel name is ESPC22. This is an event that's coming up pretty soon in Europe that a lot of people here at Microsoft are participating in. We've got a keynote with Jeff Teeper and a number of people, of course, whether they're local or flying in. This is where we've done our planning, literally, to get the final titles and sessions that we then send to the event team. The context here is it's a channel within this particular team called Next Gen Events. The team that I'm on just chose a name called Next Gen because we cover lots of products, and I own events. So I created a Next Gen Events team. And if you can see, I got different channels for the different events, and I've pinned them up here just for ease of access to get to it for today. And of course, this is the event that I'm working on next. So I thought I'd show you in context kind of a working environment, and then back out and show you how to do the create and use experience. So my first favorite feature in Teams, because I want to stay in Teams, that's the whole point, is I'm going to go and expand the tab. So if you didn't know, any tab you can expand and for lists, it's pretty important because if you notice, I just went from seeing 3 or 4 columns to now seeing a lot more. This one happens to have a lot more. If I scroll to the right, that is, again, just helpful for me to be able to then track and use. And if you've used lists before, or if you haven't, you can do obvious, easy things. Like if I wanted to filter down just to the breakout sessions, I click apply, reformats, same list with a different view of now just, and you can see up here the filter type, breakout 60. I can further filter down if I want to, narrow it down to just sessions that I own. So I may be presenting one, but I also own a couple. So if I just wanted to get a quick look out of the ones that I'm helping with, some of these I just helped get the spot for, and then of course our speakers are doing most of the work. But this narrows down my view on that same list here in Teams, and it's actually one of the things that I wanted to follow up with Chris McNulty on this particular item. And I'm going to do this part of the demo a couple of times, so you really kind of build that mental muscle of, I'm in a list, I'm in Teams, and I have a question about this list item. So if I expand it into a single list item, we have a session called Introducing Microsoft Syntex. Our speaker is Chris McNulty. It's a breakout session. Here's the abstract. And we're just getting some information back from the event team. What room is it in? We have a link to it, and that will come through. But what I really want to do is I want to ask Chris, like I've done here, just kind of prompt him. And so I can mention, just like any other conversation, Chris, if I spell Chris's name right. And there's a couple of Chris's here. If you know Chris Bortlick, he's a little bit closer to you in the Northeast region. Chris McNulty, and has the session name changed? And then just letting them know that I'm doing a demo, and I'll fire that off. So I've already started this conversation, so there's already a link back to this list item. But what Chris is going to get, since I mentioned him, like anything in Teams conversation, he's going to get a notification. And within that notification, if I go back to the list out of full mode, I can actually see in the posts, here's that thread that I started with Chris. He got that notification. He can read my context or my question. And then this is his experience. You'll see it from my experience because I'm logged in as Mark. But if I were Chris and I clicked on this link, what happens is it takes me right into the list item and the conversation context on the right. So this is what I was saying, content and conversation side by side. And that's native in Teams. You can do it with documents. You can do it with planner plans. You can do it pretty much with anything as a tab in Teams. Have a conversation right next to it. Because we're talking about conversation, the one question I sometimes get is the clarity around, well, it looks like I can comment on the list and I can hold a conversation. And think of comments as something that I want to put in the list that lives with the list. So this list is here in Teams, but it might live for other people on the SharePoint site if that's where they're used to interacting with it. Or they might be on their mobile device and it's more just through the Lists mobile app, which doesn't have that connection to Teams inherently. You can access your lists in Teams Mobile for that connection, but the clarity is really what I want to get at here. So on this particular session, originally we had Seshamani was going to be our presenter, so I had reached out to him. And since I started this list, I wanted, before I added who were our final speakers, I reached out through the list, which notified him through email. So the two differences, comments live with the list itself in the list schema in that SharePoint site where they are stored. And the comment then goes and sends a notification as an email with a link back, just the same as I showed you that Chris got. If the comment is out there with the list, then to everybody and anybody who has access to the list from an access perspective can then, of course, comment and do some work. The difference, though, if I switch over in the conversation, is now I'm closing down the boundaries, which may be the same as the list or might be different. If it's different, then I have only the ability to access and converse with people who are a member of this team. So conversation is when I want to talk with the team. Comments are when I want to reach out and connect with somebody agnostic of a team. Hopefully that is clear. If not, I can certainly talk through that a little bit more. But that value of me now being able to, within the context of the team, have the sessions listed. This is the public website. There's some other things that I put in here just to be helpful for the actual management of the event. And in here, if I went into something like the Keynote, you can see you can have a speaker column with multiple people. If I go in here, and again, we're planning to have Sesha there. If I needed to add him now, I can certainly, or sorry, Sesha's already a part of that. If I needed to add David Warner, who's also going to be there, you can see within the context of the list, I have a speaker type. It does a global address list lookup. And so you expect that. We have all the different capabilities, different column types. And so if that's the basis of what lists offer in the context of Teams, I thought I'd show you two other lists that I've been working on. That is, one of them is a kind of a similar approach, but to all the different events that I work on. And I promote this to a pretty broad set of people here at Microsoft. About 1,500 people have access to this list and use it, I think, in the way that you'll see pretty quickly, because this is now in a calendar view. So this is a different list, and this list is just about the different events that the OneDrive, SharePoint, Viva, Yammer, and now the Syntex team participate in. And of course, there are other events, and some of them overlap with the Teams team, the Power Platform team. Some of them are big and small, but this is where I actually put the information, but I present it to everybody who's going to consume it in a calendar view. And so if you imagine a calendar view as a tab in Teams can be really helpful when people are asking questions. Are we going to have a booth at that event? What's that event about? Different questions that come my way. But they can on their own just look ahead, navigate forward, and see which events are we tracking? Are we missing any? They can reach out to me and say, hey, I'd love to add this event. And if you see we're here on today, we've got the Minnesota Fall Workshops. If I click into it, like any other list item, it shows me the breadth of what we're tracking. This is their Twitter account, the main site for anybody that needs to go review more. I've used a little bit of JSON. I stole this from the Patterns and Practices team just to juice it up a little bit. That actually carries through. I'll show you a really great example of that next, of a new one that I saw somebody posting out on Twitter. So I grabbed their code and dressed it up for today. But most of it is just a proof point of all the different views, all the different formatting, a lot of the logic all comes through. Sometimes even that you can do it in Teams. There's still a few things that we're working on getting in with the Power Platform, but those are coming. If I do things with the Power Platform, still you need to do that in SharePoint. But it's the same list, same connection. Once it's connected, then you have that value in Teams. So that's one other list. Another one is I mentioned that I manage a podcast and I work with a couple people both internally and externally. Lisa is our producer and she's a full-time vendor here at Microsoft. But just like that, she's a guest. So I've invited her in. I work with her throughout the year and she gives us a lot of updates on how the podcast is doing and of course when different episodes are ready. And that's what we use this team for. And I've got a lot of different things pinned up here because I invite my guests into this space so they can learn about the show. They can update the information for our discussion outline. But if I go into the Interzone tracker, this will give you a sense of how I partly manage that show. And the same value, if I go in and expand this, you can see some of the upcoming episodes that we're working on. All of the things that in the past are green. And this is a pretty simple tracking mechanism for me. I track everything from the name of the show, who the guests were, the date that it was, and then eventually we publish a blog and get that information in here so that if somebody needs to go review and share that out to somebody internally, externally, however that is, it's a useful place for them to just come. But it's also a place for me to work with Chris, to work with our producer, and to plan ahead. So we've got a few shows planned ahead, and we always have a recurring monthly roadmap pit stop. And if you're a fan of Count Dracula, I will encourage you to go to the SharePoint roadmap pit stop October 2022. Because why? Because it has Dracula all over the place. So if you like a little bit of Dracula voice and want to have some fun, I encourage you to go to the October one. Those are just a couple examples. I'm going to pause here just to ask out loud, Michelle, if you saw any quick questions or any comments that are worth addressing before we get into the how do you create a list in Teams. I'll pause for a second.
I don't see any questions, just some comments about like how does Microsoft List compare to Smartsheet? And then I made a comment saying cool icons on your tabs. You might want to
Yeah.
explain how you got those.
I'd be happy to. We'll add one here for the add new epi. This is just a page, a list item that I created so that somebody could submit a new episode if they wanted to. So let's say we wanted to go in and rename it. So the icons she's talking about, I think, are the home, the microphone, the notebook, and it's very simple, but it's one of the most powerful things I've learned from Jennifer. She just goes as Jen MSFT on Microsoft, on Twitter. I can't remember her last name right now, but she is on the Windows team, and she's all about this shortcut, tons of keyboard shortcuts. But if you do the Windows key and the period, you get this amazing thing, which is the emoji picker. And so let's do a fun one, the party popper. And of course, you can see you can navigate through any emoji on the system. You can also add in here these different, the ASCI, I always say AXI, but I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation. You can, of course, go in here and they're just quick clicks. But if you go in Windows key, period, there are a lot of things within the Microsoft 365 landscape that support emoji. And I think for clarity around, well, what is that tab? If you add an emoji, click save, and you'll now see here we've got that fun icon. So it's really of your choosing. They're not dedicated icons like you would go and build out like this kind of icon. They're really based on the emoji that are available.
That's
But thank you
awesome.
for that. I have found it for me very helpful because then I start to use the same ones over and over again, and I start to get the sense. I use the one a little differently here for the list, but I sometimes just use the clipboard icon, and in my mind, that represents the list. But you can put up whatever you want for whatever your tab is doing. And this one's
Awesome.
a fun one. So
Yeah, there are just a couple more questions too.
yeah.
I'll let you take a sip. So Jen Microsoft is Jen Gentleman, so that's who
Yeah,
that
Jen
is.
Gentleman, that's right.
And I believe you can still do add the same icons and channel names, just like Pete mentioned in the chat.
Yep.
And tip of the day, win with a plus. So Windows key and the plus.
Yeah.
One last thing I think it was really interesting as people were talking about Smartsheet data inside of the chat. Is there a path to migrate? And I don't know, that could be Power Automate related.
Yeah. We don't have a direct path as far as bringing your data in. There's the easy route if it's in Excel. That's one that we have baked into the product. You can import data from Excel. From a Power Automate perspective, there's a lot of mapping that you can do from forms. They could be Microsoft forms, they could be other forms. So if you want to have somebody enter in data, but then it actually puts it in the list, I see a lot of people using Power Automate for that. From a migration perspective, we of course migrate from SharePoint into Microsoft lists. If you have list data from past SharePoint server versions, and some of our competitive offerings, if you're moving from an Excel-like spreadsheet competitor, or if you're moving from another database source, that would definitely be a custom connector. Most likely would be possible because we have a great lists API. We have a great Power Automate that knows the awareness of what lists are, so mapping is not hard to do. But I can't speak to the 100% with Smartsheets. I know that we work a lot with migrations from larger offerings like OpenText and Documentum, and there's a lot of things beyond documents themselves that we work through with either our capabilities or partner tooling. So I don't have a great 100% answer, but I know that it would be probably a custom approach or a partner-driven experience to do the migration from something other than Excel or SharePoint and have that be the destination be lists.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
But the other thing, just now that we've got Jen Gentleman, thank you for that, is her other amazing shortcut is the Windows key V. And I'm just doing a quick check on another screen just to make sure I don't have anything copy pasted that's a little weird to see. But if I do a Windows V, it brings up the clipboard history, which is just now part of that same experience. Here's the emojis. And if you go back, here is my clipboard history. They've just combined them in Windows 11. And it's a really great, like once you get used to that, I'm just pausing here. We're breaking our fourth wall to get to the fifth wall of Gentleman. If you do that, you'll get into the muscle of going Control, copy, 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 copy. then move into your destination and then Control V, paste, 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 instead of copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Saves you a ton of time and a lot of switching between tabs and apps. But anyway, what we're staring at here is the new list item form that I just grabbed the URL. It's a little tricky to do it, but not that hard. And once you get it, then you can actually ask people in a chat to actually fill out new items for whatever it is that the list is tracking. So that's why I have it here. If people have new episode ideas, they just fill it out and then it populates that same list that I showed you. And then we go in and validate which ones that we're going to schedule and which ones we might, put into the backlog. So let's talk about from creating a new list. So I'm going to go back into our European SharePoint conference, and I'm going to go click the plus button, just like you would in any channel, in any team, and of course, to the limit of whatever you or your IT admin has chosen to remain here. So we have a lot of apps that we ship. That's usually what's in the top. These are all the different Microsoft applications that can run as a tab in Teams. And that's a good motto to get used to saying, such and such as a tab in Teams, such and such as a tab in Teams. We're going to be talking about lists as a tab in Teams. But this is just that same experience where if you've created your own tab app, if you're using our apps, if you're, purchased or invested in another solution or another service, you'll find a lot here. And I just stay on this for a second so you just know this is nothing special. This is just where Mark goes to add something as a tab, just like you would. If you don't see lists here or right up top, just do a search for it because I use it a lot. It's always kind of one of the top 2 or 3. But if you search for lists, you'll still find it. It's right there. And of course, you can do things with lists in the SharePoint app, but that's just to bring a list in. We're going to do a couple of things. We're actually going to bring a list in, and then we're going to create a list. So I get this new create experience. This is probably one of the first-party apps that was used to create something outside of the Office documents like Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So we're really creating a new list, and I'll be very obvious on where does this actually get created, because I think that's important to at least know, even though we're going to mostly stay in Teams, the back end is still SharePoint. It's still that connected site that's connected to Teams. And it's actually one less thing that you have to do if you create a list in Teams is that where do I want to store it? You don't have to ask yourself that question. It just gets stored in that connected team site. So with that as the foundation, we're going to go and basically I told you we were going to bring in an existing list like I had showed you a couple times that was already built. But if I go in to add an existing list, if I have access to any list in my environment and the permissions are right for the members of this team so that they would also have access, I can go and just grab the URL for the list and just paste it here, validate it, and then it'll show up. But because I use this environment a lot, and we've been looking at the European SharePoint conference, I'm going to also put in one of the ones that we've been working on recently, which is the Microsoft 365 conference in Vegas, which is just the week after the European SharePoint conference. So that's this list. And I'm just going to add it here temporarily. I can add it, remove it. The list never gets changed. It just now becomes, something that I want to do up here. And we can do this kind of quickly and make it a little bit more fun. We can do Vegas, and we'll choose, not going to be cold in Vegas, but I'm going to be running all over Vegas. How about that? So it's very easy to rename, especially if you have a list with a really long name. Make it user-friendly, make it easy, make it, if it's a long in the context here where we've got the context of the event, like here I just wrote sessions because that's where we're tracking sessions. But this is the same technology. It's a list on the back end in this same team or SharePoint site. And it is just that. It's all of the sessions that we're tracking for the Vegas conference. And so you'll see some of the same material, some of our same speakers, but also a lot of different people. So each list has a lot of different people in this team. And of course, I manage it so I can invite people in or I assign them just by name. But it really is a working environment for where I can go, I can add a new item, I can update existing items, and like I showed you, I can invite somebody to update their items. So it's really easy to add an existing list as a tab in a Teams channel. I'll do it again, same list capability, same list app, step through it, click save. So I'm telling it, yep, I want a list as a tab, but instead I'm going to choose it at the top here that says create a list. And if you've been around for a while and you've seen this user interface, My hope is that it looks really familiar then. If it's new to you, I hope it's also a really clean environment where you can see, look, I can build out a new list. Like I'd said, you can import data from Excel. You can start from another list. That's what I'm going to do next. So I can show you how not only can I use the event itinerary template, which I use a lot, but I also can leverage what I've done to tweak the event itinerary, like I've been doing here for this event, and leverage that for my next event so I don't have to keep changing things. And I'll show you one of the extreme changes I made so you can see how it gets pulled through. And we now support CSV, which is Excel on steroids because it brings in some of the formatting. So if you export to a CSV file and then re-import to it from a CSV file, more than just the content actually stays intact, which is kind of cool. But if you notice down below, the real value are the templates. And if you're new today to thinking about what is lists and how does it support doing newer things in Teams, this will give you some ideas of what you might do. You might track information, issues, might have it be a checklist when you onboard new employees that you validate with your HR team. You maybe make a unique instance for the actual org that the person is joining. And of course, you tweak and adjust as you need to. But I think the big differentiator is when you start thinking about, well, I can also track physical devices, physical assets. There's a scenario that I was working through with one of our education customers where they wanted to have per each classroom the different devices that the kids can check out. So this was K through 12, and they were having different levels of devices, both laptops, and they had the different devices like iPads that they would hand out on a regular basis. So they were tracking them in the classroom, and of course, each classroom needs its own instance. But it was really easy to use the asset manager, build out a few extra columns and some logic, and each classroom essentially would have what they need to track physical devices. But if you can see, hopefully you've read ahead and looked at the different scenarios. We're adding a lot of templates. We've just added these latest 3. One of them was actually derived off of one of our corporate vice presidents. Each year around the Christmas time, he would make a list of the gifts or gift cards that he was giving to his team. And now it's kind of a growing muscle that he's added that element of, well, what year is it? Filters on the year, and then he can see his team and what he's gotten them. So there's a lot of use cases, a lot of different ways of tracking information. And to get started, especially with templates, it can be really easy. So I'm going to just go in and create one with the content scheduler. Content can mean a lot of things. But if you start to see with lists in Teams, I'm creating already different columns to track different sets of information, including images, links. There are already pre-populated choice fields based on some common patterns that we've seen when people track content. You also get a little bit of a peek ahead of what gets added and created for you. So there's actually a flow now, a real Power Automate flow that will set a flow that based on this draft due date or the publish date, you can adjust it. 3 days in advance, the person who's listed in the author column will get a notification with a link to that list item. It's a really nice, simple flow, and they're now baked into the template. And you can see we've also got a number of different views that we create, and you'll see that once we get started. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to call this the Minnesota 365 Scheduler. And I'm just going to guess with some of what I know about the Vikings. I don't want to either alienate or misrepresent, but I hope, because I loved Fran Tarkenton in the past, I'm going to choose purple, and hopefully that's okay. And since this is exciting, Microsoft Lists and Teams coming together, we're going to go to the moon with all that excitement. But if you know Microsoft Lists or SharePoint Lists, the thing that you don't see here is where do you want to store it? And I will do that just very quick demo at the end so you can see what lists look like outside, just so you know it's pretty one-to-one with a feature perspective. But we don't ask you where you want to put it because we know where it should go based on you creating it for this team. So I click Create, and like that, I will get a new list. That name, MN365 Scheduler, will become the tab name, and I can adjust that, but we'll skip over that. And I'm also getting this prompt of what else is happening. I can choose not to have that connected flow added, so it'll just opt out and it won't trigger it. I can, if I want to, create it later. And then when I click Next, the list is set up for me. It's stored in SharePoint. And by the way, now it's spinning on a couple of seconds to create that connected flow. And when I click Close, you have a blank list of which I'm just going to fill out one really quick title here. So we'll use Michelle as my guinea pig here. This is almost ready to publish since we're here. The draft date, I'll give her till Monday and make that PM so it's not too early in the morning. And the publish date will be shortly after. It's going to be a tight turn. We'll make this a 1 p.m. scheduling. And the content type here is it's going to be a blog post. So Michelle, are you ready to write the blog post?
That's me laughing on mute. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. And then once you publish it, just if you don't mind, I'll send you a quick chat if you can update the link once it's live. So I'll click save, and of course, I'm just building my list of information. I can invite everybody that's a member of this team to add their content. If I know it's just 10 people, I might send them a distinct note, point them to the list, and then, build that muscle of having other people create items, adjust the status, whatnot. But if I were to add in that author column, I got added because I added the thing. I can change that. In 3 days' time, I'm going to get a notice 3 days from December. That's going to send me a notification because that's how that flow works. And if you go into the flow itself, it is a full Power Automate flow that you can design. And if you don't like our default of 3 days, it's literally click into the flow, change the number to 7, save it, and now forever into the future, you'll have the due draft date 7 days from now. Sorry, that's just telling me because I chose that date automatically. But 7 days from that date, I would get that new flow triggered. So that is creating a list from a template. The last kind of create demo that I wanted to show you was, well, what if I wanted to create a demo from the smarts of another list that I've used? So I have a list that's similar to the one that I created for the ESPC 22 that I did for Ignite. And I really bumped up one of the choice columns with about 20 choices. And I would love to never have to enter those choices again if I'm doing something similar like Ignite, maybe next year around, I say, November 15th. I hope that you will join us for that Ignite. And this is exactly how I'm going to start planning that. Hopefully not too soon, but Ignite always feels like it's around the corner in my world. So as this spins, and I hope that it gets to where I need it to be here shortly. If not, I'll start one more time again. We'll have the luck of starting over. So go into lists, click save, it's trying again. If not, I'm going to jump out and just show you at least the value of doing this in lists itself. But we may have hit just a little funky spot here of our spinner. I can just feel on the inside of this spinner wheel is where the hamsters are going crazy in the service right now. So let me just break a little context and show you on my desktop. And we're going to start actually all the way into where I just was in SharePoint. So you can see that this is all SharePoint based. I'm going to go into that next gen events environment where I've got my site. Just have to find it. So this is the actual place where the things get stored. And I'm going to go in once my gear icon shows up here and show you that that new list that we created is technically and always stored in SharePoint. So if you know the site contents page, the site contents of this entire SharePoint environment is where we've been seeing those different lists. Here's the Ignite sessions. I'm actually going to show you Ignite from this last event. We had 50 sessions. So this is the Ignite session list. I know I'm showing you a lot of event examples. I'm going to click through a couple of different ones in a second. But what I really want to do here is from the home, I'm going to create a new list that has all of this intact except for the content. So if I go into home and I go into new list, you'll see this looks the same. It's the same choices that I have, but this time I'm going to choose from an existing list. And that existing list is that Ignite list. So I'm in the Next Gen Events site, and it's given me all the different lists that I've created, of which I want to choose this one, Ignite from November. Click Next, give it a one little tweak since we'll be planning for next year. Oh, that was, sorry, I of course chose the wrong one. That was 2021. That's not going to give me what I wanted to show you. So real quick, select an existing list, scroll down, Ignite 2022. Click Next. We'll make it Ignite 2023. Create. And all it's doing is like a template. It's already pre-populating all of these different columns that I've chosen, but also the choices within the columns. So if I go in and I choose the session type, and show you in edit mode, you'll see that all of the choices came through that I have already to choose from, all the different session types, whether it's an on-demand session, a scheduled breakout, a theme session, an Ask the Experts. These aren't things that are part of an existing out-of-box template, but they were the tweaks that I made so that the next time I use this, they're already here for me to use. And in fact, if I go in and create a new item and I click into the different session type, you'll see that the choice field is already pre-populated. So keep in mind, you can tweak lists in just the way you want them. And if you leverage the smart of an existing list onto your new list, you'll save yourself a little bit of time. And just for fun, yeah, of course, when you retry it, I guess it just loads up my existing list. So the other thing that I wanted to show you is just some of the fun things that you can do with a list. This is actually coming from one of a new JSON example that Anand Raghav, if you know who he is, he does a lot of the really cool examples. And I just having a little hard time loading our lists here. But he built out within the gallery view that we have as the default. So if you see the different views, you can go into tiles or what we call gallery view. You can also create your own new views. You can create a calendar view, both in week and month. You can create a board view. You can create lots of different views. This just happens to leverage the look and feel of a gallery view with some smarts on top of it. And the only reason I'm showing you is just to have a little fun, but also to show if you customize or use some of those JSON, the JavaScript components, that they'll flow through here and work just fine. The way this one works, it's like sticky notes. If I click on it, it actually like flips the sticky note around. So Microsoft Lists plus Microsoft Teams equals better. Gosh, I don't know what that word's going to be. Can anybody guess? So Microsoft Lists, Microsoft Teams, better together. And if you want to learn more, you can also go to the Microsoft List Resource Center and read all our blogs, demos, podcasts, and all of that. And that is located at aka.ms/mslists. But it's just an example, a really fun thing that I saw somebody doing out there that I brought into my environment. But I really wanted to show you that no matter what you do with lists in Teams, it'll carry through even to the extent of doing some of those broader capabilities like building out. We'll do it. Go into create a new view. I want to create a calendar view. I don't know if you've seen this UI. It's pretty new. It's almost about ready to ship. The default layout, like you saw, was month, but it's a week that you can now choose, and you can choose a little bit refine, how you make things show up. We'll go in and use this option. The subheader will be the owner, and why am I not able to create this? But hopefully you see, I've got to give it a name. Hello week. Click create, and now I have a new view that I created inside of Teams, leveraging the calendar view. And if I back up and go forward and back, you'll see that I can navigate the calendar to see where those sessions are. Most of those sessions from ESPC are coming up, so you would see them into the future. So let me hop out of this. I'll pause again as I kind of get through a few of the upcoming innovations for List, a lot of which, of course, is planned to flow through into Teams. But just to get another sense, just from a timing perspective, if there are a couple questions that we can take, Michelle, around anything that I showed, if there was something that I forgot to show that you can remind me, I can jump back in. Just let me know.
Yes, their chat is very, very busy. Lots of great questions. I think they wanted to see how you change the flow from a list. Like, do you have to hop over? Maybe you don't have to show it, but do you just hop over to the Power Automate icon and then change it from there, or is it an easy button?
It's not an easy button, but you do go into, so if I wanted to create from scratch, what you're seeing here is from SharePoint. This is now only available in SharePoint, but we're working to get a few of these into Teams. So you can, once the Teams has the designer element, which came with Dataverse, we're working with that team to be able to go from a list into the Power Automate design in Teams. So it's on our roadmap, and it's, sorry, I should say it's in our backlog. But from a Power Automate perspective, you can go and see your flows. So if you do that and you go into the see your flows, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes for it to final finish and show up here, just by nature of what's getting started. But from the list, I can go in, and this was the one that we created 9 minutes ago. If I click into it, you can see by name it's not yet done, but it's getting there. And you can see when it was created, what it's used for. There's that 3 days. And if I go into the edit mode, you'll see that it's a real flow within the Flow Designer for Power Automate. And once it loads up, I can do a lot of things, especially if I really know what I'm doing in this space. I can make this have a multi-state, 5 days before ping one person, 2 days before ping another person, or reach out and do some auto publishing for me. If it's an internal event, I can publish to a site, those kinds of things. But the really easy thing is the easiest part of this demo is here is where you go to change from the 3 to get beyond these prompts to something like 5 days in advance. And if I tab out of that and click save, as you can imagine, the flow gets updated, and the next time it runs and is triggered based on that date field, I now, will have that. And most of the rest of everything here is just to make sure it works right. And then if you wanted to, you could tweak what actually gets sent to the individual based on the list information. You can pull in and format the actual email notification they get. But if you see it's already connected to the right site, it's already connected to the right list, does a lot of the authentication for you. Of course, it does the permission check no matter what you do. But essentially, if you go from the list, this one got auto-created, so we already had one that was part of the template. But if I wanted to, I could go in here, Power Automate, and create a flow. And then this should look really familiar. If you know, you can go and pick your flow on the right here, navigate through, choose whichever flow works best for you, whether they exist, or if you want to go and create a new one. It's just Power Automate, full-blown, directly integrated within lists. Any other burning questions? I think the slides that I have will take me just like 2 or 3 minutes to get through. Hopefully some of the excitement, it will be outside of Teams, so I'm breaking the model of the title and description, but I hope you'll see some of the things we're working on.
Yeah, there are a few comments or questions around, does it replace Planner, or when would you use Planner versus lists?
Yeah, so the real quick answer is Planner is great for managing tasks across your team. And there are a number of different things that you can populate in the Planner or a task form. Owner, description, date, and there's a lot of friendly things they can do with some views. They're a great environment for managing tasks. Where it starts to get a little thin if you want to start doing more than just task management or project or portfolio management is when you start tracking different types of assets. You want to have greater form customization. So for us, forms are columns that you add, but of course you can further customize the form with some logic on the top, some iconography, but also you can build a form with Power Apps off of a list. So there's a lot that you can do from customizing a form for data entry or data consumption. The other pivot is we're highly tied, like I just showed you, to connecting to business logic. So if you create a Power Automate flow, it can tie to specific actions of a list item, when a new item is added, when an item is deleted, when a status of an item is changed from in planning to committed, if some threshold of some of the amount that you're tracking for maybe a client offering, the client offering reaches above $10,000, off of that, you might trigger a specific flow. Anything below that is just manageable by the standard team. Anything above that might mean that it goes to the business desk to get approval. So you can build a lot of that business logic. Exactly to the last question, a lot of it is based on Power Automate. We have some more simple things that are called rules, where you can set logic on if status changes from this to that, notify somebody. And I can show that real quickly if you haven't seen that. The lists have rules and you can build those rules and they travel with the list, whether it's in Teams, SharePoint, mobile. You build it within the list experience, whether you're in Teams, SharePoint, or the lists app. You certainly, I think that's the one of the deltas is being able to build business process around your data, which is where the list comes in.
Awesome. That's great. I think, you know what, I would love to see Outlook rules. I know we have 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Or not Outlook, I'm sorry, but list rules, because
List
they
rules
really are powerful.
Yeah, let me show you that in the context of the list app itself, just to be really clear of the different entry points. Most of everything that I hope you get is if you do use Teams, you can do everything I'm doing in Teams because you don't want to keep switching applications. But I'll also show you just a couple of other, the different views, and they're very quick. So you can see it. This is just a list, rows, columns, couple images. This one looks really nice in gallery view because I've kind of built it around the images themselves. So all of this would show up in Teams. All of this is something that I can put in Teams. If I go back to my list and I show you the onboarding experience, you can see our board view, which will update this field completed by. So if I drag it over here and it's not yet assigned of when it would complete it sort of moves around. And if you follow this one with Omar, you'll notice it doesn't have a completed by, it just says no, which means it's unassigned. If I move it into the first day field here at the bottom, you'll see here's Omar now, and that metadata field has been updated. So we've got gallery view, calendar view, this and that. But what happens when things change? And so if I go into the automate menu, hit rules, and then create a rule. And the scenario here, I'll show you the one that looks the most vivid, is when a column changes, and we'll use that same thing I just did manually moving things, when that changes from content type, which is essentially those different buckets that I was moving things around in board view, when the content type is, and we'll say, oops, sorry, it's not content type, when it is complete is, gosh, based on the name of my column. Come on, brain. Well, we'll just do it by, here we go. So when complete by that column is, and we'll say after 60 days, if for whatever reason, that should trigger some notification. If that status changes and is automatically updated, then I can build out a rule that either sends an email to me. I don't have to type in my email. I can go in here and I can add a group if I wanted to. I could use another column of data, which means anybody listed in that column. So if it was the last person who modified this, if this gets changed, then the person who last modified it gets that notification. If I click create, it's just now a rule running on this list, which means if I go in here and on this item with Sesha, I go in and I change that complete by to after 60 days, the last person to modify it, which in this case is me, will get a notification. And that's how that rule works. And it's running until I say, you know what, this is maybe a seasonal rule and I don't need it between June, July, and August, but I really need it starting in September. So if I go in and turn it on, this will not send me as many notifications. When it's on, it's then going to be an active rule. But it lives with the list. It does not require Power Automate. And it's a really powerful feature to be able to kind of automate some of those, pulling people in and notifying them at the right time when things change. And just like that, if I had moved something from a week to this 60-day window, that would also trigger that same notification because I'm changing week 1 to after 60 days. And then the notification because of that rule will get sent probably to me again because I last changed it. All right, let's show some fun stuff and not bleed into time. This is going to go quick. This is some roadmap items coming in the future for Microsoft Lists. So put your thinking cap on with a little bit of foresight into the future. There is currently running a Microsoft Lists MSA preview. This is kind of futuristic in the sense of we're actually shipping some pre-commercial features into the consumer space. So I won't bleed this too much, but if you haven't tried it, with your Microsoft account, the same one for Xbox Live and Outlook.com, go to lists.live.com. You can read about it a little bit more, sign up, and then give it a try. But you'll see features like what I'm talking about in here in a second. Some new things are shipping here first, like tab views, the real-time information that you see here where you can see where people are in the list, some of the more centralized forms from a view perspective. But like I showed you, we can also package up some of the flows. And this kind of just will walk through similarly what I showed you on that one. But if you go into something like the work progress checker, this has that same flow that gets built out. This is just a little bit in more real time. It's in 3 templates right now. And we're looking for a lot of feedback on the right flows, the right templates, if we need more, if we need them a little bit adjusted. These are pretty fresh and out of the gate. The next one is like a flow. We're tapping into approvals. So there's a whole approvals experience within Microsoft 365, and now lists participate in that. So if I have something like a travel request that requires approval, you'll see that there's the approval status and the approver that gets named that will then get that approval notification. So if I send this for approval, this is the manual way of doing it. I name my manager or whomever. they're going to get a notification, as you would imagine, within Teams, within the Approvals app, which collects all of your approval requests. And if you approve it, great. If you request it, reject it, that will send that back to the person with some notification and awareness. And of course, it updates the list with whatever Stephen, not the person who was requesting, but the approver, put in there. So we've got some work coming that brings approvals together. And you saw me do the week layout. This is a quick demo that just shows how you can do that. This one will have a little bit more information in the outset, but you go in to create a new view off of your list. And if you notice, it's going to be based off of these dates. So you go in, choose calendar, give it a name. Don't forget you can have multiple views, so you can have month view and week view. You can have multiple month views if you're tracking or showcasing different information from the same list. And when you get to the viewing of it, you'll see that right now it's based on all that list data. As you click into one, you can move things around. It'll change the date of the list item. And of course, visually, you can drag and drop. And you get a really great experience within the same view that I showed you. And of course, with that value and smarts of when you update or move things, it actually is updating the real information. And the last thing that's only in that list.live.com offering, which is our consumer to small business offering, you can see presence. And this will just give you a sense of when people are working in your list, where they're working. You see us do this with documents. You see us do this within things like Excel Live or with Microsoft Loop. Same technology, same awareness, but it is based on Microsoft account. But this is something that we're working on to bring in the commercial space. So if you're in the same list, you can actually see where people are. And it gives you a really nice indication of just who's working on what. So before last slide, Michelle, and then I'm truly done. Quick summary. There's a few things that I didn't show or talk about, but these are area of investments. All of this is to become wherever you can work and access your list. So that means everything we talked about in Teams is applicable. And I'll make these slides available to Michelle to distribute if they're helpful to review or to use if you want to share the news with other people. But absolutely, thank you for the hat. Thank you for the time. And if you give lists in Teams a try, I thank you for at least giving them a try.
Awesome. Thank you. A lot of applause for you. So everyone give them a big round of applause. I know many of you have already moved to your sessions. Thank you, Mark. I'm hoping that you can at least stick around for 5 minutes. Take a look at the chat. There's a ton of questions. There's a lot of people looking to get more information on how it integrates with this and that and all the other things. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Appreciate being able to go a little over time. I will jump into the chat. I'll minimize video. And if people have continued questions, I'm not hard to find. Find me out on Twitter for as long as that thing's around.
Oh, yeah.
Find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a note. I'm pretty easy to find. mcashman@microsoft.com. And thank you, Michelle, for making it easy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark.
Absolutely. Bye.
All right. Bye. Everyone else, enjoy your sessions and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.